Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Judy and I love history, travel, and finding out how people lived and things happened. Today I'm going to show you a small part of Milan's fabulous Sforza castle, the Filarete Tower. This time you don't have to walk very much. All you have to do is lean back, relax, and watch. Today with me on The Armchair Traveler. Given its distinctive and extremely recognizable shape, this tower, called the Filarete Tower, owes its name to the architect who is also known as Il Filarete, and it has become the symbol of the city of Milan. The tower that he designed in 1452 was elegant and embellished apparently with marble inserts. While glorious, this isn't what it appears to be, which would be a medieval into Renaissance structure. In fact, what we see here dates from the early 20th century. This first photo, which I shot from just to the side of the fountain, shows the general structure, looking a little bit like a square lighthouse of Alexandria. What we see here isn't the original, but by my count, at least the third version of the tower. Less than a century after it was completed in 1521, the tower, which had been converted into a gunpowder magazine, exploded and collapsed. It was rebuilt after that and has been modified several times over the years. Construction of the castle was ordered by Galeazzo II Visconti, a local nobleman, on the site of what had once been a Roman imperial-era fortress. It was completed over the course of about 12 years in the mid-14th century. Galeazzo only lived until 1378, so he barely got to enjoy his castle, which he called the Castle of the Port of Jove. It was enlarged by his successors until it became a square-plan castle with around 200-meter-long sides, 4 towers, and 7-meter-thick walls. I haven't been able to find a drawing that shows that castle. This one dates from the 1600s and shows the then newer building style, complete with 2 moats, outer walls, inner walls, drawbridges, and more. Today's castle area only occupies the area that I'm labeling Inner Castle. I believe the area marked as today's facade is where the Filarete Tower is located. Hardly anything from the old outer walls remains. The tall structure you see in the middle of the facade, and partly masked off by the tree, is where we're going to visit today. It's called the Filarete Tower, after the name of the architect who originally inspired it. The castle never really served to save the duchy, at least not for very long. The duchy was conquered or taken over by a long series of usurpers, finally ending with Napoleon, who actually had himself crowned King of Italy right here, by right of conquest in 1805. Reports at the time indicated that his reception was enthusiastic, but I think that was probably Napoleonic propaganda. After the final fall of Napoleon and the end of the duchy, the city of Milan decided to acquire the grounds in the 1890s with plans to turn it into something else. Heated arguments about what something else should be ensued. The 2 major proposals were to either turn it into a neo-Gothic style building. Neo-Gothic was quite popular at the time, but something this grounds had never been, or return it more or less as the Sforza family had left it. Fortunately for us, the Sforza rebuild contingent won the argument. In 1893, there was actually a public subscription drive to pay for restoring the buildings. The architect in charge of that was a man named Luca Beltrami, something of a historical scholar, and his plan was to remove everything that had been installed after the time of the Sforzas and restore the rest more or less to the way it had been. His efforts probably peaked in the reconstruction of the facade and building of the Filarete Tower, based mostly, I've read, on a painting he found about it by a man named Francesco Napolitano, which I'm showing here. There isn't much in that painting to give you a clue, just 2 round towers. Before an invited guest or a potential invader could even get to the castle, he had to get past 2 moats here on the city side of the premises and then over a drawbridge. The drawbridge was apparently built into this tower, although all that remains today is the opening where the chains to lift it must have been. Next would be the gates and a heavy and rather fierce-looking metal contraption called a portcullis. The portcullis sat in grooves on either side of the gate and could be raised or lowered using heavy ropes or chains. Now let's go look at the top of the tower. Working our way down from the top, we see the bells and then a glorious clock, which looks quite medieval or maybe Renaissance, but also dates from the 1905 rebuilding. It still works. Clocks were a regular feature in the Renaissance. There might even have been one here since the 17th century rebuild. In our next stop at the Duomo, we'll learn how the Milanese managed to coordinate the time of all the clocks in Milan, including this one, based on a meridian line inside the Duomo. The next detail is a statue of St. Ambrose, again added in the 1905 rebuilding. I was surprised to learn it was so new. It certainly looked like about 500 other statues I've seen over the years in churches all over Europe, but it was commissioned to look that way. Ambrose was the patron saint of Milan, and for a short time, between when the duchy was ruled by the Visconti family and when the Sforza family ascended into power, it was actually referred to as the Ambrosian Republic. The final detail of the tower I'm going to show you is a plaque dedicated to King Umberto I, shown here on a horse with a sword. On the left is a photograph of him showing him with one of the best mustaches I've ever seen. Umberto is generally remembered for his role as a constitutional monarch. He was a soldier and a military commander. On his watch, Italy expanded into the Horn of Africa and joined the Triple Alliance along with Germany and Austria-Hungary. This decision and the war which followed would eventually cost all these countries dearly, but at the time it must have seemed like a good idea. He was well thought of at the time, and on his watch, Italy transitioned into a unified nation. He also played a role in the early stages of the country's industrialization. Unfortunately, his reign was also marked by political and social turmoil, which culminated in his tragic assassination. Tensions had mounted in the country as the result of public opposition to the colonial wars, the spread of socialist ideas, and crackdowns on civil liberties. Umberto's military turned on his own people. Whether he ordered it or not is unknown. However, because of economic discord, food prices went through the roof, people and their children were going hungry, and there were even food riots here in Milan in May of 1898. These riots were violently suppressed by the military. At least 80 demonstrators were killed, as well as 2 soldiers, and another 450 people wounded. The overreaction of the military led to the demise of the prime minister and his government by July of that year and created a constitutional crisis which had the effect of strengthening Umberto's hand. In 1900, 2 years after the massacre, Umberto was murdered by an anarchist. Despite it all, the city of Milan saw fit to dedicate the tower to his memory. Perhaps if the tower had been completed somewhat later, they might have picked a different hero. Thank you for joining me on this site visit today. Come back next time for a different visit with me here on The Armchair Traveler.